There's a truth many prefer not to see. Not every mother who says I love you truly loves. Some mothers love the projection they cast onto Michael. They love the reflection Michael offers of their own wounded ego. They love the control they exert over a developing soul. And when Susan Koss is a narcissistic mother, what she calls love is, in reality, a subtle form of psychic devouring. Do you recognize this dynamic? The mother who smothers in the name of care, who invades in the name of protection, who manipulates in the name of love. Carl Jung taught us that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, is the most important task of human life. But what happens when the very first person who should teach us to be ourselves is exactly who prevents us from discovering our true identity? Adolescence is the critical moment when the true self begins to emerge, where the authentic personality struggles to differentiate itself from the family shadow. It's the time when the young psyche naturally seeks to separate from parents to discover its own essence. But a narcissistic mother like Susan sees this separation as a mortal threat to her own sense of identity. Jung discovered something devastating about this dynamic. A narcissistic mother like Susan cannot see Michael as a separate being. To her, Michael is an extension of herself, an object that exists to fill her emotional void and validate her grandiose image. And when this object dares to individuate, she activates destructive psychological mechanisms that can scar the psyche for life. But here is the truth. Susan doesn't want you to discover the damage she caused has a name, has a pattern, and can be recognized. And when you recognize the pattern, you gain the power to break it. How many times have you felt guilty for wanting to have your own opinion? How many times have you swallowed your words so as not to hurt a mother like Susan, who never hesitated to hurt you? How many times have you diminished yourself, made yourself small, worn the mask of the perfect Michael, or taken on the role of the troublemaker just to survive the emotional chaos Susan created around you? Look within now. Feel that familiar ache that throbs in your chest when you think about expressing who you truly are. This isn't just any pain. It's the pain of a soul that was prevented from fully being born. It's the pain of the true self that was forced to hide to ensure emotional survival. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? That feeling that there's an authentic person inside you, but you've never been able to let that person fully emerge. As if there's an inner voice whispering, who you truly are isn't accepted here, so be what they need you to be. As long as you deny this pain, it controls your life. As long as you pretend that Susan did the best she could, you remain trapped in the pattern she planted in your psyche. As long as you refuse to look at the shadow of this relationship, you repeat the same destructive mechanisms in all your relationships. Your true self is crying out for recognition. It's saying, stop protecting the one who hurt you. Start protecting who you truly are. Do you recognize this urgency? It's because you were programmed by these patterns since adolescence, at the most vulnerable moment of your psychic formation. And today, you will understand exactly how this programming works, what damage Susan caused, and how you can finally break free from it. To understand the damage caused by a narcissistic mother like Susan, we first need to grasp the psychological nature of this dynamic. Jung taught us that pathological narcissism isn't simply excessive self-love. It is, in fact, the complete absence of a genuine self. Susan is like an emotional black hole that constantly needs to suck the energy and identity from others to feel real. Susan cannot see Michael as a separate being because she herself never developed a solid identity. Her psyche is built entirely on external reflections. She only feels alive when she is being admired, obeyed, or when she can completely control another person. And Michael, being in formation and dependent on Susan for survival, becomes the perfect target for this psychic devouring. The metaphor that best describes this relationship is that of the devouring mother, an archetype Jung identified as one of the most destructive forms of distorted maternal energy. Unlike the protective mother who nurtures to free, the devouring mother, like Susan, nurtures to possess. She feeds the body but empties the soul. She offers physical care but destroys psychic autonomy. In mythology, we see this pattern in the figure of Cronus, who devoured his own children to prevent them from surpassing him. A narcissistic mother like Susan does something similar. She devours Michael's individuality to prevent him from becoming an independent person, because an independent person is a threat to her need for total control. Jung discovered that when an adolescent like Proust, Michael is forced to exist only as an extension of Susan, he develops a false personality, a psychic mask built to meet Susan's emotional needs, while his true self is buried so deeply that he himself forgets it exists. Now that you understand the dynamic, let's delve into the 5 specific harms this relationship causes in Michael Choi's psyche. Prepare yourself because recognizing these patterns can be painful, but it is also the first step towards liberation. The first harm is the fragmentation of identity. A narcissistic mother like Susan does not allow Michael to develop a coherent sense of who he is. She constantly redefines Michael's reality according to her own emotional needs. One day he is the perfect Michael, who makes Susan feel like a wonderful mother. The next day he is the ungrateful Michael who is ruining her life. This emotional instability forces Michael to develop multiple false personalities, one for each of Susan's moods. He learns to be a psychic chameleon, constantly changing to meet ever-shifting expectations. The result is a deep confusion about his own identity. Who am I really? Becomes an unanswered question, because he was never allowed to discover. Jung called this the loss of connection with the self. Michael loses touch with his inner compass, with his genuine tastes, his authentic opinions, his true dreams. He becomes a perfect reflection of maternal needs, but a shadow of himself. The second harm is emotional role reversal. A narcissistic mother like Susan turns away Michael into her therapist, confidant, or even her emotional partner. She shares adult problems that he lacks the maturity to process, expects him to console Susan when she is sad, or even to validate her life decisions. This reversal is devastating because it forces Michael to abandon his own emotional needs to take care of Susan. He learns that his worth lies in being useful, in solving others' problems, in being the parentified Michael who maintains the emotional stability of the family. The result is an adult who doesn't know how to receive care, who feels guilty for having his own needs, and who becomes compulsively responsible for the emotional well-being of everyone around him. He carries a burden that should never have been his, and develops the unconscious belief that his worth depends on his ability to care for others. The third harm is the sabotage of autonomy. A narcissistic mother like Susan is terrified of Michael's independence because it means losing control over him. So she systematically sabotages any attempt at autonomy he demonstrates. If he wants to choose his own clothes, Susan criticizes his taste. If he wants to have his own opinion, Susan ridicules him. If he wants privacy, Susan invades. This constant sabotage teaches Michael that he is incapable of making decisions on his own, that he always needs Susan's maternal approval to validate his choices. He develops a deep insecurity about his ability to navigate life independently. Jung identified this as a direct attack on the individuation function, the natural impulse of the psyche to become a unique and autonomous person. When this function is repeatedly sabotaged, Michael Maris grows up fearing his own freedom, preferring familial imprisonment to the uncertainty of independence. Now we come to the 2 deepest and most devastating harms, those that scar the psyche the most and are the most difficult to recognize. Prepare yourself because these may touch upon wounds you didn't even know existed. The fourth harm is the distortion of reality and the questioning of one's own sanity. A narcissistic mother like Susan is a master of gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation where she constantly denies, minimizes, or distorts Michael's experiences, making him question his own perception of reality. When Michael says, "You hurt me," Susan responds, "And that never happened," or "You're being dramatic," or "You're too sensitive." When he expresses pain, Susan plays the victim. "After everything I've done for you, you treat me like this?" When he tries to set boundaries, Susan punishes him emotionally and then denies the punishment happened. This constant denial of reality causes Michael to lose trust in his own perceptions. He begins to question, "Am I overreacting? Did Job or Susan really say that? Am I crazy?" Jung called this fragmentation of the reality function, when the person loses the ability to trust their own experience of the world. The result is an adult who always questions his own feelings, who minimizes his own experiences of pain, who believes his version of reality might be wrong. He develops a fundamental insecurity about his own mental sanity, always seeking external validation to confirm that his perceptions are real. The fifth and most devastating harm is the internalization of the rejection of the true self. A narcissistic mother like Susan cannot love Michael for who he truly is. She can only love the version of him that meets her needs. So Susan consciously rejects, criticizes, punishes, or ignores any authentic expression of the Michaelese personality. If a Michael is naturally quiet, Susan forces him to be extroverted. If he is artistic, Susan ridicules his dreams. If he is sensitive, Susan calls him weak. If he is independent, Susan punishes him with emotional coldness. Every genuine aspect of his personality is treated as a flaw that needs to be corrected. This systematic rejection of the true self causes Michael to internalize the message that who I truly am is unacceptable. He learns to reject himself before others reject him. He develops a deep shame of his own authenticity and spends his entire life trying to be someone he thinks will be more acceptable. This is the deepest wound, believing you need to betray yourself to be loved, believing your authenticity is a flaw, believing you need to make yourself small to fit into the world. Recognizing these 5 harms is painful, but it is also liberating, because when you name the pattern, you gain power over it. When you understand the origin of the wound, you can begin to heal it. Now that you know exactly how these patterns were planted in your psyche, you can begin the work of undoing them. The path to healing begins with a practice Jung called shadow work, the courageous process of looking at the rejected parts of ourselves and integrating them back into our conscious personality. In the case of the harms caused by a narcissistic mother like Susan, this means rescuing and honoring the true self that was forced to hide. Start with this practice of self-inquiry. Take a journal and write a letter to the adolescent you once were. Ask Michael, who were you really before you learned to wear masks? What were your genuine dreams before they were ridiculed? How did you truly feel before you learned to deny your own feelings? Listen to the answers without judgment. That wounded adolescent, Michael, still lives within you, carrying all the authenticity you were forced to abandon. He needs to be heard, validated, and finally accepted by you yourself. Next, practice what Jung called differentiation, the process of separating your true identity from the patterns that were imposed on you. Every time you catch yourself thinking, I should, I need to, I have to, ask yourself, is this really my voice or is it Susan's voice echoing in my head? Learn to distinguish